My name is Lukas Kugler, and my proposal is the Artery. And the Artery is mainly a revitalization of the Brooklyn Bridge, as I look to create a transportation solution that prioritizes pedestrians and cyclists on the bridge. My first move for the project was to expand the public domain by expanding it across the entire width of the bridge and placing that new structure on top of the existing road deck frame. I then introduced separate pathways for the separate users so that cyclists, runners, and pedestrians all have their own paths. The bridge is also a biophilic intervention, including ample greenery along the entire width of the bridge as separation between those paths. Using native species as the plantings of choice, the project gets tied together through this greenery from borough to borough. Along the bridge, there's also opportunities to switch between paths periodically, so a cyclist can get off and take a picture of the view, or a runner can grab a bottle of water at one of the vendor stands on the bridge. Additionally, as mentioned, there's vendors and emergency services kiosks on the bridge to help with to create economic opportunity and increase safety and security on the bridge respectively. And the Artery does aim to respect the structure of the bridge and complement it with a new structure to juxtapose old with new, while keeping the iconic status intact. Also, the Artery introduces a phased approach to remove cars over time and create a commuting highway on the lower deck and leave the upper deck as a tourist and leisure destination. The crossing point is the first image here, and we're looking at that opportunity to switch between paths. And this occurs regularly on the bridge at an interval of 800 feet to allow for users to switch whenever they would like for a desired view or if they get tired on their run across the bridge. And breaking down the paths, we begin with the bike path, which is a 2-lane bike path running across the entire bridge, only interrupted by the crossing points. It's complemented by the running path, which is also a 2-lane path, and these run directly through the center of the bridge, only interrupted by the crossing points. They're flanked by the greenery to create separation while also creating a biophilic atmosphere. On the outside edges, 2 undulating paths, both on the north and south side of the bridge, are there for pedestrians. This includes tourists, families, children, or the elderly, or anyone really using the bridge as a destination, kind of in the linear park typology. At the crossing points, the emergency service kiosk acts as the first line of defense in cases of emergency where response or something is needed to ensure safety and security on the bridge. Finally, near these crossing points, the vendor stands are located in dedicated spaces that are tucked into the strips of greenery that open onto the undulating path to allow for economic opportunity, but to keep them out of the flow of circulation so that they're no longer a hindrance. They're also located near the crossing point, but not at the crossing point to avoid pinch points and crowding at these points of intersection. Here we can see how the Artery moves around the structural towers, in this case on the Manhattan side. So the Artery paths flare around the tower to one side to create unobstructed views. Here on the Manhattan side, the Artery flares around the south edge of the tower. So that means the southern undulating path comes around to the southern side of the bridge, out beyond the tower for unobstructed views of the financial district and lower Manhattan. The running and bike paths then shift through the southern opening of the bridge under the southern arch, with the northern undulating path fitting through the northern opening. On the Brooklyn side, the opposite happens, heading to the north for views of Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge and Lower East Side of Manhattan. Here we can see the bike path under the Brooklyn Tower. This shows how it shifts through that opening of the tower for the bike and running path to fit through there. Then for the Brooklyn side, the undulating path on the north side fits through, or rather it doesn't fit through, but it goes beyond the northern side of the tower for those unobstructed views, with the southern path fitting through the southern opening of the bridge. This view also lets us see the biophilic atmosphere on the bridge and see how the Artery is really a strong biophilic intervention. There's lots of ample greenery, including trees and bushes, to improve the environment, both atmospherically and environmentally. The Artery roots itself in each borough via these anchor parks. In Manhattan, we capitalize on the existing City Hall Park and close the streets around it to create a larger park for the public. The artery design is then implemented on these closed streets, however, with more porosity for access to the surrounding street network. Commuters then use dedicated lanes along the edges to funnel them onto the lower deck of the bridge, as the commuters would be using the lower deck over time through the phases. In plan here, we zoom in near the entrance to the bridge of the landing plaza, which is the initial node between the artery on the bridge and the anchor park and the surrounding borough. The landing plaza in the center is the point of access to the other parts of the park, with the bridge entrance off to the bottom right, which heads up onto the top deck of the artery. Flanking that entrance are the lower level entrances, and these are how the commuters would get onto the lower level over time. Those then turn and curve out onto Center and Park Row to take them out to the edges of the anchor park. You can see how the artery design takes over Park Row and Center Street, and out of view, this would also happen on Broadway to the west of City Hall Park and Chambers to the north of City Hall Park. This replaces cars and expands the public domain while also enveloping City Hall to create the park as a larger item itself. In this view, we can see the landing plaza, which is the initial open space as mentioned. This acts as a transition space for users between the paths within the anchor park and the open spaces in the park, as well to the bridge and vice versa. However, this is also a destination space for visitors. Events could take place here, performers could put on a show, and vendors could set up and sell products here. However, the space is not as described on the bridge and is open to allow flexibility between seasons and events. Also in this view, we can see the lower level entrances on the bottom right and to the side on the left. This is the commuting entrances onto the lower level that would go around the artery and under onto the lower level for the commuters on bicycles and eventually runners over time in the phased approach. On the Brooklyn side, we continue that same design language, capitalizing on existing green space and expanding and reclaiming the streets around it to create the larger park. On the Brooklyn side, we envelop Cadman Plaza Park and Whitman Park and integrate them by closing the streets to create this park. In plan, we show most of the park except a little bit of the bottom because that gets cut off in this view to see all the parks, starting with the landing plaza again off on the right. This accesses the artery again and the lower level entrance, which then also runs all the way down Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard to the edge of the park. To the idea of closing streets, we reclaim Cadman Plaza East, Red Cross Place in an adjacent parking lot, and finally Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard. We close these and implement the artery design to create the larger anchor park and connect Cadman Plaza Park and Whitman Park. These moves create the larger park and allow for the anchor park to be just like on the Manhattan side. The Brooklyn Landing Plaza, again, is the same idea as on the Manhattan side, connecting the bridge and lower level entrance to the rest of the park. This space is for circulation, but also for gathering. It's the entrance, and as you can see, the entrance to the bridge is here in the center of view between railing and railing with the undulating path, the strips of greenery, and the bike and running path. The rest of the anchor park is behind and to the left of this view for the rest of the users to access. Switching to a sectional study of the project, the existing Brooklyn Bridge uses 3 car lanes in each direction with a up to 16-foot promenade on the top for cyclists, runners, and pedestrians. However, it can be as narrow as 9 feet, which is very problematic. Having cyclists and pedestrians mixed can be a bad situation for the safety of users. And that's why in the first phase, we look to create a minimal intervention, closing off the outer traffic lanes and introducing bike lanes. This move allows those cyclists to get off of the top promenade, giving pedestrians and runners more space on the top promenade and giving cyclists their own space where they don't have to worry about crashing into pedestrians. To separate the cyclists from cars, we introduce a planting box that is made of wood to separate the cars from the bikes and introduce young greenery to begin the biophilic atmosphere on the bridge. In phase 2, we introduce the artery in its full scope on the top deck to create the larger public domain with the undulating paths on the outsides and the bike and running paths on the inside, flanked by the greenery. On the lower level, the bike path and plantings remain, but the traffic lanes are transitioned into HOV lanes to ensure that they are as efficient as possible for car traffic on the bridge. In the final phase, cars are removed from the lower deck entirely, making way for a commuting highway. This allows bikes and runners to use the lower deck as a commuting avenue where there are no crossing points, no vendors, and no interruptions. This furthers the concept of separate pathways for separate users, as it distinguishes not only between the mode of transport, but also the reason for using the bridge, whether that be leisure or commuting. And this phase splits those users between the two decks. So the top deck becomes a leisure and tourist destination for the undulating paths, cyclist paths, and running paths. And then the lower deck becomes a commuting highway for the runners and cyclists. Beyond the bridge, we look at expanding the arteries throughout the city. The artery is just the beginning in the first phase of completion. The next step is to create a corridor from Central Park to Prospect Park, closing down Broadway and Flatbush to create a green street corridor from borough to borough. Finally, in the third phase, we would create an ever-growing network of green streets throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn. And this network would reclaim streets to give space back to the people, allowing them to move throughout the city within green space and on foot and on bikes. Ultimately, the artery is a vision for the future. It's a concept to solve the city's issues that can be reused and implemented all across the city and across all 5 boroughs. With COVID-19, New York City is bound to face many issues, including the fear of public transit, MTA funding shortages, the potential resurgence of car traffic, and the increase in cycling and running as transportation modes. The artery is uniquely designed to be the solution to these issues, giving everyone their own space to move safely, easily, while enjoyably. If you'd like to put New York City and the Brooklyn Bridge back on track, remember the artery. Thank you.
Wow, that was great, Lukas.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I like how you close with the hard sale pitch at the end. Like, we want to get city back on track. Remember the artery. But no, actually, the points that you close out on about moving people safely and easily, I think it's something that really jumped out from your proposal initially. And I think working with you over the past 6 weeks, it's been really a joy to watch that kind of build up over time. How like your transportation solutions of like how you're allocating space to different users moving at different speeds, it's only gotten like smarter and smarter. And I think the attention that you pay to your biophilic intervention has also developed as well, to the point where it really feels like you've got, you know, the High Line on the Brooklyn Bridge. Like you can see that inspiration has come through, and I think you've acted on it and delivered it really well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's just 2 highly commendable points that I wanted to share at the start of the jury feedback. One question that I had though, is that when I look at the public spaces that you're creating, the anchor parks on either side of the span, it would be good to see the same care to like articulating use in those spaces as you have for the span. And I get that for those entrances for those anchor parks, you're really thinking more about transition and circulation. But still, like if you're just thinking about vendors, like when I look at those renderings, you're creating such a like beautiful space. It's so ample. It's hard to imagine vendors not wanting to set up there. So like if they do, like it'd be great to know from the designer where you thought they would be, because you definitely give them a place on the span so that they're able to operate freely without interfering with other people. But you know, give us that same idea on the anchor parks. Like where would they be so that they can operate freely without getting in everybody's way? That was my only real criticism. But overall, I think this is an amazing proposal. And just job well done. This is great.
Thank you, Andrew.
So I'll jump in. Hi, it's Marla Gale. What I really appreciate about this proposal is really the clarity of this idea, that it's really about this undulating path. And what I appreciate about that is the fact that it's not a straight line. It's undulating, which means it's really about the experience. It's not just about getting from point A to point B. So I think that really sort of imbues this with, you know, a certain sensibility about taking in that whole experience of walking across the bridge. And another thing that I really appreciated about this is that you're using the green spaces they're the continuous thread throughout this entire process, right? It's from park to park on either side, and then it's really what's separating the users on the bridge itself. And that provides everybody, all the different kinds of users, with their own experiences, which I think is really cool. So if you're a cyclist, you're sort of in this space that's about cycling, and you're surrounded by the trees that separate you from pedestrians. And I think that that's a very unusual situation in the metropolitan area, to sort of have your own space like that. And, you know, also sort of looking at this phased approach sort of allows for a look-see about how people's transportation patterns are going to be changing in the next months and years, just sort of based on our current experiences. And I think that phased approach allows everybody the time to see sort of how those ideas are playing out. And sort of my last point that I really appreciated was the fact that you've also extended beyond the bridge, and you're making these connections to the major green spaces in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, and that can become a real model and a metaphor for the way that we look at infrastructure and how that ties into green spaces and the way people are living sort of beyond the Brooklyn Bridge. So congratulations, it's a really lovely proposal.
Thank you so much.
Quickly before we go to the next comment, thanks for that feedback, Marla. Lukas, can you stop share?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. And then quickly, I just want to acknowledge that Jonathan Gardenhire has joined us. Welcome, Jonathan. I know maybe you just joined in, but if you, at any point during this feedback round, if you want to share a comment, go ahead and feel free to do so.
Andrew, may I say something?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I just wanted to add to both your commentary and Marla's that I felt that this proposal has really evolved to be a very, very strong call to action for the greening of the bridge. And as Marla pointed out, the environs adjacent to it. Some of these ideas are so winning and so strong for me. I think that this kind of proposal can be fashioned as a huge call to action. I mean, when you said, let's just close, for instance, I mean, there's so many aspects of this that I wanted to take notes on, but when you said close Cadman Plaza East and connect those parks, I'm like, honestly, DOT and Park should be doing that right now. So anyway, I just had to say that as a Brooklynite. But that being said, the ideas for the use on the bridge and which are highly pedestrian and user-friendly can really be imbued into so much of our thinking for the future of the bridge. So I just really appreciate how your thinking has evolved to really one idea that can be packaged as this is the future.
Thank you.
That's great. Let's see. Isabella. If Isabella has any comments?
Yeah.
Jonathan? Sure.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to echo Marla and Regina's comments that it's been exciting to see the complete evolution of your proposal from the very beginning. And I agree with Regina that it's very coherent about what the main idea really is about this biophilic design. So I thought your ideas came across as very clear and coherent. So I congratulate you on that. And I really appreciated that you paid very close attention to the safety and really considering the needs of the user groups and having differentiated spaces on the bridge really addresses the safety concern. So I thought in a lot of ways it was very smart and in a sense like practical about considering the needs of the different speeds that people are going at and differentiating that. So I thought that was really smart. And also that you didn't just limit yourself to the bridge, but you were considering the landing plazas and the entry onto the bridges and separating the lower deck from the upper deck. It really felt like you thought about this very comprehensively. So I just want to applaud you for really taking the safety and considerations of the user groups pretty seriously in your proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Just like one more note on that, to echo something Isabella just said and what Regina said before, I think the way you laid out the phasing was really strong too. That made me, I had that thought sparked by what Regina said when she was looking at your idea for Cadman Plaza and creating that Brooklyn Anchor Park, saying, you know, you could start doing that now. I think the way you laid it out, there's some things that could happen in the very near term that would make both a significant improvement the way people moved around in both those spaces, but also took a big step toward your big vision that you laid out, your main idea, which is ultimately like the greening of the space and how that could be a model for greening other infrastructures in public spaces throughout the city. So yeah, the way you handled phasing, which is like really, really great. Just wanted to note that.
Wonderful. I think we're at time. The cultural current.
Oh yeah. Next team up. So Maggie and Aubrey, are you ready to share your screen?
Hi guys. Can everyone see our screen and everything?
Yep.
All
You're all good.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so hello, we are Aubrey and Maggie. We're from Knoxville, Tennessee, and this is our project, The Cultural Current. And so before we start describing our project, we just want to talk a little bit about the inspiration for our project. It really came from our visit to New York earlier this year, pre-COVID, when we got a chance to walk across the bridge. And so you can see the images from our kind of experience on the top row here. Just experiences of overcrowding on the walkway, people walking in the bike lane, and then all of the space above the cars that was really kind of underutilized. And then further underneath this, after New York, we headed off to Europe, and we were really influenced by the urban spaces that we saw and experienced in Europe. And so we were in Copenhagen, Paris, Barcelona, and Reykjavik. And so we really drew ideas from these existing spaces. In addition, color is really important to our project. And so we drew colors from icons in New York, such as the Statue of Liberty and the yellow taxi, which you can see here on the left. So moving into our proposal specifically for the pedestrian walkway, we're using the river as a metaphor. Similar to Lukas, we're having a kind of curving, sinuous pathway. And ours it retains the central corridor or central walkway of the bridge itself with keeping the wooden planks there. And that's to kind of notate to pedestrians that that is the area you should be walking and like continuously moving. And so kind of like the main current mainstream. And then building off of this metaphor, you can see on the right image here, there will be eddies. So these kind of the curves away from the main pathway. And that's where pedestrians can stop and take photos and do all the things that everyone loves to do on the bridge, but they actually have space to do it now. In addition, we've expanded the walkway around the towers, Tower 1 and 2. These were, right now, they exist as pinch points on the bridge, but we really wanted to expand those spaces out to create these plazas, plazas for vendors, street performers, and then also provide more information on the bridge about the bridge. And also looking at the bridge, like I mentioned before, we're preserving the existing wood planks on the bridge to kind of serve as that central walkway. But then we're adding this kind of really fun textural element of playground material. It's very springy and can be colored in various bright colors. And it would kind of really add this new element to the bridge that's not existing there right now. So this section perspective shows the reimagining of the upper and lower walkways. The upper walkway is now much wider and allows a lot more pedestrian traffic specifically for tourism. And it allows the pedestrians to kind of flow and pool as needed, while the lower roadway is now using the existing car lanes for cyclists and faster paced pedestrians. And as you can see, there's these viewpoints off of the edges of the bridge where you can see different parts of the city more clearly. This image is looking at our railing design and how it changes to meet users' needs as it moves on the bridge. The closer you get out towards the water, the railing flattens a bit more so that you can start to peer over the edge. But in other areas, it folds so that it can become user seating or bike racks as needed for people on the lower roadway to come up and enjoy the upper pedestrian walkway. And then looking at these sections, it starts to show the different versions that the bridge can go through. This can be done either as phasing or just as different options. So in a time like COVID, the upper option is probably best because it allows for maximum social distancing between people and cyclists, and allows more users to access the bridge with that additional space. The two lower options show different versions of how to phase out car traffic in a more normal time than right now. So starting by removing one of the car lanes and moving the cyclists down to the lower roadway, and then slowly phasing out the car traffic to only including large-scale transportation like buses. And then with the final version, leaving those two pedestrian walkways as the car lanes where emergency service vehicles can access the bridge if needed through those areas. So expanding off of the bridge, we looked at how we can use this idea of the current as this element on the bridge and kind of how it can flow into the surrounding areas on the anchor points. And so we kind of thought about these using the river again as a metaphor as floodplains, and looking at continuing this pedestrian walkway, taking away the car lanes from the bridge ultimately. And so these are all all of these floodplain versions correlate to our ultimately the proposed version of bike and walk that Maggie just mentioned. And so you can see here how the bike lanes continue off of the bridge. This is one thing that we have that was really important in our conversations, was keeping these user groups segregated so that there wouldn't be as many collisions, and there is very obvious spaces for those user groups to interact. And so, as you can see from these floodplains, it expands out even further into tributaries. Again, tributaries feeding the river and feeding this idea from the Brooklyn Bridge. It's kind of flowing off of the Brooklyn Bridge, but then also kind of flowing back to it. And so you can see here how we've created this kind of really long greenway pedestrian corridor through the entirety of Brooklyn, Manhattan, and then up to the Bronx. So it begins in Prospect Park, passes Central Park, and ends up at the Bronx Zoo. It's a 16-mile corridor that would go through the city. And you can also see in this image how the bridge, or how the sections of the greenway have been broken into these different colored groups. And so each of these groups, we've been thinking about the neighborhoods that exist within those spaces and how the neighborhoods can kind of start to influence the character of the bridge, of the walkway as well. And so you can see in this image here of El Museo de Barrio, how this would how the bridge, the idea of this cultural current would interact with elements that are along the walkway itself, and how they would connect back using these kind of color as wayfinders and kind of connecting these important cultural elements in Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens, or Brooks and Bronx. Sorry, not Queens. And so what we're thinking about is really engaging the community in these interactions as well. We've proposed this idea for this kind of grand 16-mile corridor through the city, but we don't want to be the ones in charge of designing all of that. And so we're looking at, we've kind of come up with multiple different options and different ways that things could take place on this greenway. But it's really up to the communities to decide what they're missing, what they would need from a public space, and kind of come up with their own solutions to this space. So we're really presenting this project as an opportunity for the city to be more engaged as a whole in the cultural current.
So this diagram starts to look at how the Open Streets Initiative can be pushed further and further set up to work with our project. One of the main things that we really were looking at was how the bike lanes start to change. So with traditional New York City streets, the bike lane is placed on the outermost lane between the cars and the sidewalk. But when you're in a pedestrian use area, it's much easier to move the bike lanes to the center lane next to the green median, so that pedestrians are able to walk between the open streets and the sidewalks, not walking through the bike lane, possibly causing accidents. And this rendering starts to look at how these open streets can be used at various different times. So on the left, you can see more of a daytime normal use, small areas for gathering, places for vendors, and just an area that people can come out and enjoy being part of the city. On the right side, you can see how this could transform to suit a different kind of need, whether that's a celebration or a festival, and how the space can transition from day to night based on what the community is looking for. Maybe they want a place to celebrate some of these cultural holidays and share that with their neighbors. Okay, so this is our last slide, kind of looking at the project all as one large piece. We see this as an opportunity to connect multiple different user groups, multiple cultural institutions throughout the city that were otherwise disconnected. We see this as a way of connecting different user groups, different minorities throughout the city, and giving them all a place to come together and have easy access to the city that uses the bridge as a catalyst for urban design change. Okay, I'm done now.
And we understand our presentation is a little bit short, so if you have questions, we're happy to answer them.
Great, that was awesome. Can y'all stop sharing your screen real quick? Cool. No, great. I always love when you guys present. This is it's such a fun proposal. And I love that inspiration that you have behind the idea of looking at the river as a metaphor for thinking about how you want to move people across the space, but then also how you want to like connect different communities and spaces that weren't connected before, and kind of breaking down the space in terms of the floodplains and the tributaries and the span itself makes it a bit clearer so how you expect your concept to affect those different geographies really well. So I think that as a mechanism, it really helps communicate your idea. And I just like that there's this artistic bent to it through your use of color and form, that you're trying to make sure that there's like a visual connection happening between the communities and even people who are interacting on that space. I might kick it over to Isabella to kind of comment next, but something that she said when we were initially looking at proposals kind of stuck with me for a long time, is that kind of one of the cool things about this proposal is the way you use color, that you can imagine people walking across a bridge and thinking like, oh, like, let's meet up in the yellow section, right? Or let's meet up in the red section before we head into Brooklyn Together. It becomes like a wayfinding tool almost, a way for people to better navigate the space, better come together. And then when you move beyond the span, it's like you're thinking about using this to connect with institutions that the current kind of moves past along that 16-mile corridor as well. So yeah, I just think it's a great concept, using the river as a metaphor. I think the way you deployed form and color actually works to make these spaces more cohesive. It helps people kind of navigate the space, kind of understand what's usable. Overall, I think it's a really, really strong concept. So congratulations. again on the proposal, and job well done. I think it's great.
Thank you.
As you segue to me kind of naturally, if you don't mind, Marla.
Go for it.
Yeah. I also want to just echo Andrew's comment that this is just a really fun proposal to just look at and kind of imagine. It really is just bold, and I really appreciate that because it's just fun and it's imaginative, and I really appreciate the creativity that went into it. I really like that this proposal doesn't treat communities as a monolith. I feel like you guys really paid attention to the differentiation between different communities. One way of doing that is through your use of color, but also just having some sort of community participation is important. And I think after our last commentary session, I forgot her name, but she had, I don't remember the name of the consultant who had given you that feedback, but I can really tell that you guys considered her feedback about considering each of the community needs. And I really appreciate that you guys didn't just have like this concept as an abstract, but it really seems like there was attention given to that.
So I'll go next. So I really want to, I totally agree with what Andrew and Isabella have said. I love the idea that you use the river as a metaphor. And as like a lifelong New Yorker, I don't think about the river that much, and I don't think most people do. And I think bringing that in as a sort of a way of organizing your whole concept is really wonderful. And I totally agree that the use of color on this as more than just wayfinding is so refreshing, because typically color in cities is a very, it's usually a temporary kind of an installation. It's something that happens around a certain moment or a certain celebration, and then it disappears. So I think that this thread of color that sort of goes from borough to borough is really a very intriguing idea. And I love the connections that you make to different cultural institutions, and that you tie them together on this whole pathway, on this whole greenway. And I also agree that sort of this whole community engagement piece was critical several months ago and is even more critical now. And that bringing in the voices of the people that are going to be using this is critically important. And I just think it's a wonderful and very playful kind of a concept, and it's really beautiful.
Thank you. Gina, do you want to close us out?
I really I enjoyed seeing the progress here, and I also I liked how much you thought about I mean, I do think of the river in New York City as a lifelong New Yorker, but I do really think that you thought about this on a lot of different levels, and it was fun to listen to the presentation and see the images and see you sort of layer that in, and it just got richer and richer and richer. So I know that was by intent. I see you smiling, and for me, I really appreciated that. I thought also the renderings were really great. And in New York City right now, we're seeing a lot of really great pedestrianization of our street renderings, and yours are right up there. So I mean, this is obviously a very issue of the moment, right? I'm seeing it all over my social network, and we're seeing a lot of it. But it really, they're very strong.
Thank you. Jonathan, would you like to add something? I don't think we can hear you for some reason. No.
Yeah, it's still not coming through.
You want to type it in the chat, perhaps? Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I also just wanted to emphasize and say how much I love the sort of community engagement portion, and sort of how you've also left in that area a moment for flexibility where you don't know what the possibilities are. So it was nice to just think about how kind of different one area might be from another based on what those community needs are. But yeah, and altogether, I think it's great. And the use of color is also quite exciting.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we'll have our last team present. Do look down.
Yeah, I'll share my screen now. Let's see. All right, is this working for everybody?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Well, hi everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today, and congrats to the Artery and the Cultural Current for their amazing presentations and amazing work. Our project is titled Do Look Down, and we're a team of 3 from fairly different backgrounds in terms of work and study. Shannon is from Hong Kong, and she's a rising junior at Barnard College. She's our only architecture major, actually, double majoring in architecture and psychology. Kwan's is my little brother. He's 17 and he'll be studying at NYU in the fall. His his background is more in music and the performing arts, but he hopes to be able to study a broad range of arts at NYU. And for myself, I'm Eugen. I'm going to be a second-year PhD candidate at NYU in mathematics, and I graduated from Columbia in 2019, which is where I met Shannon. So we definitely have an eclectic mix of interests here, but still, it was a lot of fun sharing ideas and designing together. And so I hope you guys all enjoyed this presentation as much as we enjoyed making it. Our proposal was born from 3 guiding principles that we wanted to emphasize as kind of a framework for our design and where we believe the priorities of any reimagining should be. The first has to do with preservation, that the current form and aura of the bridge has to be kept sacred, and so any enhancements should be either unobstructive or in some sense reversible. Our second principle is essentially that the bridge has to be able to speak to a wide range of people. And this follows from the first guiding principle in the sense that because the Brooklyn Bridge features so prominently, being almost visually synonymous with New York City, it has a certain duty to represent the powerful diversity of the peoples that it bridges. And so in our design, we work to achieve a level of flexibility that will allow the bridge to speak simultaneously to wide ranges of cultures, backgrounds, and identities. And finally, our third guiding principle is that a successful proposal should have a lot of potential for future progress and future adaptations, that the capacity to adapt and evolve is inherent to the bridge, just as it is to the spirit of New York City. So with these guiding principles in mind, preservation, flexibility, and future-mindedness, we came up with the following proposal. So here we've identified 5 main design elements. The first is the reclamation of the bridge's roadway in its entirety for pedestrians and cyclists. The second is the installation of a glass walkway above the girders. This will be a mixture of translucent and frosted glass, and it'll add about 60 extra feet of width to the existing promenade on the upper deck. The third is the installation of LED and projection systems on the bridge's towers and cables. These will be powered using kinetic pavers installed on the bridge's walkways. We also install similar paver projection and interventions in the spaces adjacent to the bridge. So for example, in this image here, we have Fulton Ferry Park. And lastly, since the reclamation of the roadway for pedestrians will result in new entry and exit points, we detail plans to remodel these old car lanes into public spaces.
So first we will cover the glass walkway above the bridge's girders before and after our changes. So through using space above the roadway, the glass walkway offers 30 extra feet of width per side, providing leeway for more opportunities for community engagement and cultural expression. For instance, cultural performances and events will be held on the bridge, along with art installations projected by LED displays, and vendors can sell their goods along the walkway to passing pedestrians. Using two different forms of glass, translucent and frosted, we designed a binary pattern for the glass walkway, inspired by interweaving cables of the bridge. One side has a higher proportion of frosted glass, making it more amenable for stationary stakeholders, such as performers and vendors, and concentrating the more translucent areas at the arches. This translucent material allows for new ways to experience the Brooklyn Bridge, as pedestrians can enjoy the roadway by looking up and by looking down. We can once again enhance this experience through swapping or overlaying the standard glass panels with removable colored film to increase the dynamism of the bridge and further engage local artists. So here we can see how the interplay between color, glass, and light can be effectively implemented in other New York City bridges. And we demonstrate this with an installation above the Williamsburg Bridge bike path, further showing how each design element is both adaptable and replicable. Here is a visualization of the central promenade fitted with kinetic pavers during the winter season. With a vast amount of newfound space along the bridge's walkway, we open new doors for creative programming to evolve and adjust even in intemperate weathers. The central promenade will function as a sort of express lane on the upper deck, since sightseers and lingerers will be naturally drawn to the glass walkway. We've also elevated the central walkway so that it is level with the girders. Next, we'll head below the glass walkway to the roadway. In our mission to represent all communities and uplift all identities, we will repurpose the roadway's original function and reclaim it for pedestrians and cyclists. We will incorporate the Brooklyn Flea Market, which is currently shut down due to COVID-19 concerns on the roadway, which would greatly support the thriving community of local artists that often, and especially now, suffers from a lack of exhibition space. Given its location between the city's boroughs, the revival of this event would orient the Brooklyn Bridge as a conduit to uplift and celebrate New York City's highly diverse cultures.
Our next major design elements comprise kinetic pavers, projections, and light displays. Electricity has been and will continue to be the starting point of nearly every technological achievement, and thus the ability of our bridge to generate its own energy ensures that its potential is limitless. Generators could be installed beneath the flooring of the lower roadway and central walkway and be used to harvest energy produced by pedestrian footsteps. This energy is in turn channeled back into the operations of the bridge and its adjacent spaces, such as street lamps or light displays and charging stations. Moreover, smart city paving may collect data on movement patterns to generate behavioral models of traffic trends, which would then be used to inform future programming and enhance the user experience. With that, we reimagine traffic as every footstep on the bridge becomes literally powerful. We reimagine the means by which people interact with one another, as well as with their built environment. So to be a part of a collective effort to power the bridge can be a driving force to unite and empower stakeholders of all walks of life. And finally, this technology provides new life to what it means to move across the bridge and be a part of New York City. We further inspire creative architectural solutions for proactive sustainability, bringing new potential for what our spaces can look like in a future where environments respond to the needs of the community and vice versa. As it stands today, the lighting on the bridge looks like this. But with the reversible touch of intentional lighting design, along with projection map art, it could look like this. The surfaces of the tower can be brought to life through visuals of civic and cultural importance through power generated directly from the kinetic pavers, speaking directly and giving encouragement to those on the bridge, as well as onlookers from afar. We selected the Statue of Liberty for its symbolism to New York City and its vantage point to the monument from the Brooklyn Towers. And these visuals can be selected by New Yorkers themselves through an app that employs augmented reality, allowing visitors to collectively contribute to and vote on the light display of the week. This ensures that the processes and programming of the bridge are engaging, but also democratic. But beyond the bridge, art installations can emerge across New York City, all powered by kinetic pavers installed on walkways with heavy traffic. By reimagining the bridge in tandem with its neighbors, we hope to reinforce the intimate relationships shared among them, while featuring art and messages that are meaningful to the local communities that they each serve. A transparent OLED display can be installed in the facade of James Carousel to preserve the visibility of its stunning interior while also responding to closures due to COVID. While magical holograms can be projected onto a fountain mist produced by the water of the East River, set against the backdrop of the Brooklyn Bridge and the Lower Manhattan skyline. The newly renamed Juneteenth Grove of PLAZA can be illuminated and enhanced to embed symbols of history and culture that foster pride in Black identity and heritage, while also holding city planners accountable for not only creating Black landscapes, but maintaining and innovating them. The names of World War II service members that are currently inaccessible due to the neglect and closure of the Brooklyn War Memorial can be projected on its facade, offering a quick response to the desire for improvements to be made while there are still Brooklynite veterans who are still alive. And by making use of the different sides to the structure, we can transform it into a living service memorial that simultaneously offers those who have served the city at times of crisis, then and now. But coming back to the bridge, we can also respond to John A. Roebling's desire for its anchorages to serve as a publicly accessible plaza by reviving the legacy of Creative Times Art in the Anchorage, a series of installations and events that were hosted within the bridge's anchorages until 2001. Finally, the facade of City Hall can host projection maps that activate its historical identity as a platform for activism and protest. Given its significance to both the Black Lives Matter and queer liberation movements, we chose a piece that demands for the intersectional treatment of marginalizing political systems that threaten the rights of both and in turn all communities.
Okay, so lastly, we'll discuss matters of access on the bridge, namely issues of mobility on and around the bridge, as well as the new exit and entry points created from reclaimed car lanes. So here we propose to place a set of stairs and a ramp at the bridge's arches or towers. We felt that this was a natural point of mobility between the upper and lower decks since people tend to congregate here already. We also proposed a set of stairs at the bridge's center in between the two towers. This gives a point of mobility at the exact halfway point. And on especially hot days, we felt that this might be a good point to switch to the better shaded lower deck. Moving off the bridge and onto the reclaimed car lanes, here we have the car lanes exiting the bridge on the Brooklyn side, so the cars are coming towards us. And we picked a point where they merge with Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard. In our intervention, the green lane here will be reclaimed as the new bike exit lane so that bikes can merge seamlessly onto Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard if need be. And the purple lanes form a wider entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge Promenade. On the Manhattan side, we have here the car entrance point turning from Center Street, and here we've reclaimed the space as a bike entry point. The green lane is currently a left turn only lane, and so we propose converting it into a bike only lane. We've also shown here removable bollards to illustrate that signage and removable barriers will be implemented to prevent cars from mistakenly turning onto the bridge, while still allowing for emergency vehicle and vendor vehicle access if need be.
2 minutes.
Sorry?
2
2
minutes.
minutes? Okay, great. We've put together a series of site maps that explicitly lay out all the new entry and exit points from car lanes and from our own interventions. Zooming in on the yellow box here, we have the off-bridge entry and exit points on the Brooklyn side, along with color coding for which lanes will be for cyclists, pedestrians, and so on. We already talked about the new cyclist exit points, so we want to introduce now access points leading towards open space opportunities adjacent to the bridge. More specifically, we zoom in to the access point at Cadman Plaza West. On the left, we see a car lane forking as it exits to Cadman Plaza West, and on the right, we have these car lanes reimagined with kinetic paving and recycled wood. The recycled wood hopefully alludes to the wooden promenade, as well as the various sustainability efforts in Brooklyn Bridge Park using recycled materials. Here we've boxed a new access point we envision at the Brooklyn Bridge Tower, so this is of a slightly different flavor because it's actually on the span of the bridge. We've considered the possibility of installing an elevator at the Brooklyn side tower. Reason being that it would give quick access to Fulton Ferry Landing, and it's worth noting that currently on Google Maps, the fastest walking route from the bridge to Brooklyn Bridge Park is around 19 minutes. Turning to the Manhattan side now, we again have this layout of access points, and if we zoom in on the car lane exiting the bridge towards Center Street, on the left we can see what it looks like now, a road slightly below the promenade, and on the right we have it reimagined as a nice park with kinetic paving and opportunities for greenery. So hopefully all of this illustrates the vast potential for the creation of public spaces from reclaimed car lanes that would really bring to life these currently cramped exit and entry points. To conclude, we'd like to discuss our vision for phasing. The first two phases on top here show a partial and then full roadway conversion into pedestrian and cycling space with the availability for emergency vehicle access in the bike lane on the innermost lane if need be. This can be done somewhat immediately and therefore gives the option for it gives a good option for addressing social distancing needs demanded by the ongoing pandemic. On the bottom, we have the installation of the glass walkway above the girders in two phases. First on one side, then the other. All in all, we hope that through the creation of space and the manipulation of energy, we've managed to uphold our guiding principles of preservation, flexibility, and the potential for future reimagining. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Shall we open it up to the jury? Andrew, you've been kicking us off.
Yeah, no, it's wow, it's incredible. Yeah, I think what's so remarkable, or rather striking about the proposal where it stands now for me, is that you lay out your reimagining principles in the beginning, and your moves so elegantly respond to those principles. So when you're thinking about preservation and responding to diversity and voice, like that's actually kind of a tough thing to balance. Like, how do you make this space responsive to a wide range of communities without really touching it that much? But then when you lay out your moves, it's like, well, we're going to reclaim the road space below, take off cars, and make more space available for pedestrians and bikes. We're going to add a glass walkway above the girders to add more space to the upper deck, while making like an express lane for pedestrians and bikes on that center walkway. And then you come in with like improved access on both sides of the bridge. And then you have this light activation move, which is really, I think it's one of the more powerful moves proposed by any team, young adult or professional, in the entire competition, because it's something that, like, you know, other teams have proposed dramatic moves physically to open up space around the bridge, thinking specifically about the anchorages. But what you have here is a mechanism where, without knocking anything down necessarily, you can totally transform a space. And then you have this narrative around it where you're like capturing quote unquote people power to activate the whole thing with your connected pavers. So there's just like a lot here that kind of just screams wow. And then on top of that, the renderings of like the light transformations of the before and after shots of like lighting before and the lighting reimagined. It just makes the whole concept really, really striking. So that was a very long-winded way of saying, well done, team Do Look Down. This is really remarkable. I think what you pulled off is quite astounding. And yeah, I'm glad, really excited to see where this proposal landed from where it was 6 weeks ago. So congratulations, team. Looking forward to what the rest of the jury has to say. Yeah, no problem.
Marla, would you like to jump in?
Sure. So I agree with everything Andrew said. First of all, the renderings are like a total knockout, and they give so much life to your ideas. They're really absolutely fantastic. I love the idea of the glass walkway. I love the idea that light comes through it and you have a sense of the activity both above and below you. And I think that that's really magical. This whole notion of these kinetic pavers, and that the users bring the energy that you need to sustain sort of what you're planning on the bridge and in the adjacent spaces, both as a metaphor and as a sustainable approach, I think is really exciting and is so transferable to so many other spaces and infrastructure in the metropolitan area, that to me, that's really cool. And just the idea that the people bring the energy to the building is really, it's a great message and it's a great idea. I love the projections on the towers, because I think that talk about flexibility, that can really be anything at any time. And it allows you to bring messages like you did with the Statue of Liberty wearing a mask. I think that that's really, it's both magical and really important as a billboard and as a way to sort of create messages. And, this whole idea of extending the art installations to through the use of the kinetic energy and reimagining the anchorages is really, really fantastic. So to me, this is like a really exciting and fun and interesting and sustainable approach to sort of the way we can think about not just this bridge, but any other bridge.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I agree. This project is so whimsical, and I actually used to work at Creative Time, so that was a nice shout out. And just, you know, the way that you're thinking about incorporating public art and incorporating the same type of, you know, sort of really sort of wide engagement just excites me. And the sort of glass surface is so bold. You know, it's something I wouldn't imagine. And just, you know, it's just everything's so new. All of your ideas are so new. They're not things that I think, you know, this project's a lot different from the others in that respect.
Thank you. Regina?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know it was my turn. You know, I loved all the comments that came before me. I mean, the two things that are so memorable for me is the use of the glass walkway, which, you know, is so successful in the Grand Canyon. I just wish somebody would have the balls to do something like that out here. So I just had to say that. It's just very exciting to me, and I think can be really used really intelligently, and really motivates me to think about the Brooklyn Bridge as a national treasure. And I think also the use of art and projections, which we've done in Dumbo historically for a few years, are, you know, so iconic, or can be so iconic. Those are really exciting. And I have to say, just on a sort of just pure emotional level, your ideas of reusing the War Memorial in a thoughtful way also, for me, really was, I did have an emotional response. The building isn't nearly used as well as it could be, and it's a handsome, thankfully preserved building that isn't undermined at all. And I love that you raised that as an issue. I mean, really though, you know, the overall, like Marla and Andrew said, is this idea of bringing this life to the bridge again. And it's, well, not that it doesn't have life now, but from a pedestrian perspective, and it's very motivating. So I really thank you, and I'm just so impressed with how much work and thought you've put into this over the past month and a half.
Great, thank you. Isabella.
Yeah, I really want to applaud the effort from the original idea to where it is now. You've been very cohesive about making these simple gestures just speak volumes. I mean, initially I had some hesitation about the glass, but it's true, it's bold. It's something that you would never imagine for the Brooklyn Bridge. But then when I see this attention to just small things that make huge difference, like putting a film on top of the glass, and you're looking at how that affects the lighting below, like those are small key moments that really speak to your attention to detail. And also the community participation, having some sort of digital interface that has some sort of facilitation between the community and what they're putting out, what you guys are proposing. So I think that's really meaningful too. And I just really appreciate in general, just like the small moves that really speak volumes. I think that's really smart as designers. And one question I have, just because you guys are the most interdisciplinary team, is just, I'd love to hear more about what the working dynamic is like. And I just love to hear more about that.
I think they should speak for this question.
Working dynamic? Well, we're in 3 different time zones right now. So the first thing is one of us either has to wake up really early or sleep really late. And then, yeah, basically we just get together, throw a bunch of ideas, and hopefully one sticks. I think it was really fun because we were, I really feel like everyone contributed in a meaningful way, and everyone's ideas were respected and heard. So it was a fun time.
Just because all of your backgrounds aren't in architecture.
Exactly. Right.
Strong design proposal. I think that's really awesome.
It is really good to see, and something that we love at Alen is interdisciplinary work. It's so hard to do. but the output is always something amazing. So hopefully, whatever journey it was like, it was fruitful. Definitely seems that way.
Definitely.
Well, I'm just gonna close this out. Just again, a huge, huge congratulations to the teams and all the proposals, and just it's been amazing to be able to see sort of that initial proposal you submitted and where we are right now. I think the jury will be submitting their evaluations to Andrew. And at the same time, you should be promoting your proposals online so your friends and family know, and they're voting for you or their favorite one. And we hope to announce early next week, and we'll have private conversations with all the teams prior to that. Any questions before I maybe do a small aside with just the jury? No? Okay, I'm gonna just ask the jury folks to hold on. And again, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, teams.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much.
Thank you. Congratulations, everybody.
Really, congratulations and thank you very much. It's really inspiring.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you for this
Thank you.
opportunity.
Alrighty. Do you guys have, it looks like we're at time. If we have an extra 5 minutes, is that okay with folks?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So thank you guys so much. I know this was a large time and investment on your part, and really appreciate it. And I know the teams appreciate it. It's so important to have input from diverse perspectives. As I was even just saying, or to Isabella's question, interdisciplinary work is really important, and that's something we really try to bring to the table. City Council and Van Alen has been thinking about how we can take all of this work to basically drive DOT to make some improvements to the bridge, use some of the ideas that we put forth. And so we're drafting a letter with some recommendations on things we want to see. So we just wanted to share that with you, and that's in the works. Some of the things that we're talking about are pretty high level, right? Like introducing commuter bike lanes to the roadway, increasing pedestrian space by reclaiming some of the bridge roadway, thinking about piloting. I think some of the teams did a really good job thinking through that. I think specifically the big team in particular talked about how can we do this in small phases to get there. So trying to introduce that idea. Also talking about improving access to the bridge and reclaiming those anchorage spaces, and improving access to nature. I think those are the key components we're right now going to be asking for in our recommendations. I just wanted to see and do a quick temperature take if there's something that really resonates with you with that. If there's something that's on your mind, either you can share it now or think about it more and get back to us via email, but just wanted to share that on a call.
I mean, I think throughout the past two sessions, we saw a few different ways to reuse some of the adjacent roadways, both Park Row, from the police department over. I can't remember exactly which one was which right now. They're sort of all blurring, but we saw a bunch of roadway ones on both sides that I think DOT could embrace or start making moves toward. But we saw them on both sides. There were a couple of really great renderings from, you could pull. You heard what I felt about Cabinet Plaza East just now, which seems like you could do it tomorrow if you just got the court system and the emergency place to agree with coming from the other side. But the Manhattan ones were just as exciting.
Yeah, I think just to add to the laundry list of things that we want DOT to start to pay attention to is, this conflicting information about what the structural capacity of the bridge is and whether or not the promenade can be expanded. Because there's got to be a structural firm out there that's interested in doing a very interesting pro bono project to really take a look at that and sort of get some real conclusions on that. Because there are so many interesting ideas about expanding the promenade. And it's really reliant on what you can really do structurally.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, right, if it's not structurally sound to do it now, what would it take to do it, right? And I don't think we know what that delta is. It didn't, even from that one press leak, it didn't really seem to express, you know, how many different scenarios were analyzed. So, I mean, that's what that would be about. Like, I could agree that an engineer would come to the conclusion that the existing systems couldn't support, but we didn't.
What can it support?
Or what would it take to change it, right?
Right.
If, I mean, the other thing is on the long shot here is that if the BQE is ever rebuilt, it's going to be, you know, $1 trillion project, and what could be added into this to ameliorate the effects of that. And, you know, pedestrian access to the Brooklyn Bridge, to me, rises to that level for the obvious reasons. And so that's why we, you know, from an advocacy position for the Van Allen Institute to sort of scope that out and then continue as things unfold on the BQE. Look, in this budget world, we know things are going to get pulled, but or stalled, or, you know, played out longer, but that just gives you more time to advocate for very, very big moves that should be paid for.
Jonathan, as a nearby resident, any thoughts or anything that you've been pining for?
This has all just been quite exciting. I've been having separate meetings with the big team who really are interested in engaging with different community members, mostly about need and just kind of to get an idea of what people are feeling about this. And we've already been doing lots of work in regards to resiliency on the waterfront, and in a lot of ways, if something like this was to continue, a lot of the kind of ways that the city has pulled back some of the plans and things that should have been implemented, this kind of allows more other possibilities to happen across the, you know, across the district. So starting to think more creatively about what that looks like, especially from like an organizing perspective, and figuring out what sort of the need is and how we can best, you know, communicate that, has been, you know, on the tip of my mind.
You know, so much of this, when you look at everybody's phased approach to how they were thinking about this, so much of this is really like paint and planters, quite honestly, to really dedicate certain lanes for different uses. I mean, there's nothing cheaper than paint and planters. So, I mean, that to me is the biggest sales pitch for trying some of these ideas out, because it's inexpensive and it's reversible. And that's something that nobody can really argue with.
And in a period right now of light usership, they could use this time right now. Right? If Google just announced that they're not going back to work till this July, a number of other corporations are going to, unfortunately, you know, are going to stick with that. So we're going to have very light usership.
And construction costs are also down now. Even if something had to be actually physically built, you know, construction companies are, let's say, not as busy as they were. And construction costs are down and material costs are down. You know, all those things are a little bit of a carpe diem moment in a totally crazy way.
Yeah, no, those are great points and definitely things that we'll incorporate into our messaging, and just also our long-term thinking.
That's
Andrew L or B, any other thoughts or things you guys have been thinking about that I missed?
No, I think you covered it all. Just to add that, you know, the council is really excited to take all of the great ideas from the competition and use them to push forward for actual action. You know, we don't want this moment and the enthusiasm around these ideas to dry up. We want to push for actual change. And this feels like a moment of opportunity, honestly. I mean, you see all of the the press coming out lately about different ideas for transforming our streets and public spaces. Like we're not the only ones talking about this. We're just like part of a chorus right now, demanding change in our streets and public spaces. And I think you saw some of our teams allude to the fact that, like, you know, this weekend there were marches across the bridge. Like right now, space is power, as I think a lot of our teams alluded to, and yeah, there's just a lot of things coming together right now where this feels like the moment where we need to demand change.
Okay, well, with that, thank you guys. I don't want to keep you any longer than we have. It's been so great to have you and hear your insights, and a big thanks again.